Millionaire sees pregnant ex-wife working while having dinner with new girlfriend, but his reaction. Inside LeBlanc, Manhattan's newest five-star restaurant, Lorenzo Richardson adjusted his Rolex with practiced nonchalance. The gesture, like everything else in his carefully curated life, served a purpose, in this case drawing attention to the timepiece's diamond-studded face. Across the table, Victoria Bennett's emerald eyes sparkled with appreciation, her fingers toying with the stem of her wineglass. "I still can't believe you managed to get us a table here," Victoria purred, her voice carrying that distinctive Upper East Side lilt. "The waiting list is months long." Lorenzo allowed himself a small smile. Benefits of knowing the right people. He didn't mention the substantial donation to the owner's favorite charity that had secured their reservation. Such details weren't meant for dinner conversation. The restaurant hummed with the quiet energy of New York's elite, the subtle clink of fine china, the measured tones of important conversations, the occasional burst of refined laughter. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's lights twinkled like earthbound stars, creating the perfect backdrop for what Lorenzo had planned as another conquest in his carefully orchestrated life. Victoria leaned forward, her designer dress catching the light just so. "You know, Lorenzo, I've been thinking about that development project in Dubai. My father's firm would be perfect for—" The words faded into background noise as Lorenzo's attention snagged on someone, moving through the dining room. A waitress, her dark skin contrasting elegantly with the restaurant's crisp white uniform, navigated between tables with practiced grace. Despite her obvious fatigue, she carried herself with unmistakable dignity, her movements efficient and purposeful. Lorenzo's throat went dry. The champagne flute in his hand trembled slightly, sending ripples through the golden liquid. It couldn't be her, not here, not now, but it was. Michelle, his ex-wife. The discovery hit him like a physical blow. She looked different, thinner in some places, fuller in others. Her face had lost some of its roundness, but her eyes still held that quiet strength that had first drawn him to her, and there was something else, something in the way she moved, protecting her midsection. "Lorenzo, are you even listening?" Victoria's voice cut through his thoughts, sharp as a blade. "I'm sorry, I was just—" He trailed off as Michelle turned, finally spotting him. The recognition flickered across her face like lightning, surprise, pain, and something else he couldn't quite read. She recovered quickly, professional mask sliding back into place, but Lorenzo knew her too well to be fooled. The slight tremor in her hands as she arranged plates on a nearby table told him everything he needed to know. Victoria twisted in her seat, following his gaze. "Is something wrong?" "No," Lorenzo said automatically, the lie bitter on his tongue. "Everything's fine." But nothing was fine. Michelle was pregnant. The realization hit him as she turned to the side, her profile visible for a brief moment. The careful way she moved, the subtle roundness beneath her uniform, it all made terrible sense. Questions bombarded his mind. How far along was she? Why was she working here, of all places? And most importantly, why hadn't she told him? "You look like you've seen a ghost," Victoria observed, her tone carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Just remembered something about work," Lorenzo muttered, forcing his attention back to his date. But his mind kept drifting to the last time he'd seen Michelle, 8 months ago, during their final attempt at reconciliation. The memory of that night burned in his chest, the desperate kisses, the tears, the promises neither of them had kept. 8 months. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Victoria was speaking again, something about her upcoming charity gala, but Lorenzo couldn't focus. His world had narrowed to peripheral glimpses of Michelle as she moved through the restaurant, each sighting adding to the weight in his chest. He watched as she served a nearby table, her smile professional, but strained. Even exhausted and clearly struggling, she carried herself with more genuine grace than anyone else in the room. The contrast between her quiet dignity and the affected sophistication surrounding them made his stomach turn. "Shall we order?" Victoria's voice dragged him back to the present. Lorenzo nodded mechanically, but as he raised his hand to signal for service, panic gripped him. Would Michelle be their server? What would he say to her? What could he say? A different waitress approached their table, and Lorenzo felt both relieved and disappointed. He ordered without really seeing the menu, his mind spinning with possibilities and regrets. "You seem distracted tonight," Victoria noted, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Her fingers were cool and perfectly manicured, adorned with rings that probably cost more than Michelle made in a month. The thought made him withdraw his hand. earning a raised eyebrow from Victoria. "I apologize," he said, forcing himself to focus. "It's been a long week." Victoria launched into a story about her recent trip to Paris, but Lorenzo's attention kept drifting to the glimpses of Michelle he caught between tables. Each time he saw her, the carefully constructed walls of his current life seemed to crack a little more. He remembered their last real conversation, the night everything fell apart. Michelle had accused him of caring more about appearances than substance, of letting his fears about what others might think poison what they had built together. He denied it then, defensive and proud, but watching her now, working herself to exhaustion while carrying what could only be his child, he realized she had been right. The evening stretched on like a bowstring pulled too tight. Lorenzo went through the motions of dinner, laughing at appropriate moments, making the right responses, but his mind was elsewhere. He found himself calculating Michelle's tips based on the tables she served, wondering if she had health insurance, if she was getting proper prenatal care. When the bill came, he added a generous tip, knowing Michelle wouldn't be the one to receive it, but unable to stop himself from the gesture. Victoria noticed the amount and smiled approvingly, misreading it as another display of wealth rather than the guilt-ridden compensation it was. As they stood to leave, Lorenzo caught one final glimpse of Michelle. She was standing near the kitchen, one hand pressed against her lower back, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. The sight stopped him in his tracks. "Lorenzo," Victoria called from near the coat check. "Are you coming?" He turned toward Victoria, toward the life he'd chosen. The familiar world of wealth and influence where everything was manageable because nothing was real. Then he looked back at Michelle, who represented everything he'd run from. Genuine emotion, real consequences, true connection. "Yes," he said, but the word felt hollow. As he helped Victoria with her coat, Lorenzo knew with crushing certainty that his carefully ordered world had just been irreversibly shaken. The question was, what was he going to do about it? Outside, the November wind whipped between the buildings, carrying the promise of winter. Victoria pressed close to him, seeking warmth, but Lorenzo felt cold in a way no physical contact could remedy. As they waited for the valet to bring his car, he found himself looking back at the restaurant's gleaming windows, knowing that somewhere behind them, Michelle was still working, still carrying their secret. He had spent the last 8 months convincing himself he'd made the right choice, that ending things with Michelle had been the mature, practical decision. Now, watching his breath form clouds in the cold air, he wondered if it had actually been the most cowardly thing he'd ever done. Lorenzo spent the night pacing his Upper West Side penthouse, sleep eluding him as memories of Michelle mingled with the reality of her current situation. The morning light found him standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection haunted by dark circles under his eyes. In his hand, his phone displayed the restaurant's website, the cursor blinking accusingly in the search bar. The knock at his door startled him. Victoria swept in before he could fully open it, impeccably dressed in a designer suit despite the early hour. "You left so abruptly last night," she said, her tone careful but her eyes calculating. "I was worried." Lorenzo stepped back, creating distance between them. "I had a lot on my mind." "About that waitress?" Victoria's voice carried a hint of steel beneath its silk. "I saw how you looked at her." The directness of her observation caught him off guard. He turned back to the windows, buying time, but Victoria's reflection appeared beside his own, her manicured hand settling on his arm. "Who is she, Lorenzo?" He considered lying, but the weight of the truth pressed against his chest like a stone. "My ex-wife." Victoria's hand tightened momentarily before withdrawing. "I see." She moved to his bar, pouring herself a measure of morning coffee from the expensive machine. "And the baby?" Lorenzo's head snapped up. "You noticed?" "Please." Victoria stirred her coffee with deliberate precision. "I notice everything. The question is, why does it matter to you?" The timing, Lorenzo thought. 8 months since their last night together. 8 months since he'd chosen his comfortable world of wealth and influence over the realness Michelle demanded. 8 months that had changed everything. "I need to know if it's mine," he said finally. Victoria set down her coffee cup with a sharp click. "And if it is? What then? You'll throw away everything you've built? Everything we could have together?" She gestured around his luxurious apartment. "For a waitress?" The words hit him like a slap. "She wasn't always a waitress," he said, his voice tight. "She was a corporate lawyer when we met, top of her class at Columbia." "What happened?" Lorenzo's throat constricted. "The firm let her go during the merger, said it was downsizing, but..." He trailed off, remembering the subtle discrimination Michelle had faced, the passed-over promotions, the whispered comments. He'd been so focused on maintaining his own position, his own reputation, that he'd failed to fight for her when she needed him most. "That's unfortunate," Victoria said, but her tone suggested she found it anything but. "Still, it's not your problem anymore. You're divorced. If that baby is mine—" "If," Victoria emphasized, moving closer. "And even if it is, there are ways to handle these situations discreetly. My father knows excellent lawyers who specialize in such matters." The casual cruelty of her suggestion made Lorenzo's stomach turn. "That's not what I want." "Then what do you want?" Victoria demanded. "To play happy families with your pregnant ex-wife. To throw away your reputation, your social standing, everything you've worked for." Lorenzo moved to his desk, pulling up his calendar on his laptop. "I want to make things right." "There's nothing to make right," Victoria insisted. "She made her choices, you made yours, life moved on." But had it? Looking back, Lorenzo realized his life hadn't moved forward so much as sideways, trading one superficial relationship for another, one empty social engagement for the next. Meanwhile, Michelle had faced real struggles, real consequences. "I need to talk to her," he said firmly. Victoria's laugh was sharp. "And say what?" "Sorry I abandoned you, but now that you're carrying what might be my child, I'm suddenly interested in your welfare." She moved to stand between him and the door. "Think about how this will look, Lorenzo. Think about the scandal." "I don't care how it looks." "You used to care," Victoria reminded him. "It's what drove you to end things with her in the first place, isn't it? The whispers at the club, the raised eyebrows at charity events, the way certain doors started closing." Lorenzo flinched. She wasn't wrong. He had cared, too much, about the subtle social pressure, the unspoken prejudices that had made his marriage to Michelle increasingly uncomfortable in their elite circles. He'd told himself he was being practical, that their worlds were too different, that they wanted different things. But seeing Michelle last night, carrying herself with quiet dignity despite everything, had forced him to confront the cowardice of those excuses. "I made a mistake," he admitted, more to himself than to Victoria. "The only mistake would be throwing away everything for a moment of guilt-induced nobility." Victoria's voice softened, becoming almost gentle. "I understand you feel responsible, but there are better ways to handle this. Let me help you." Lorenzo looked at her, really looked at her. In another time, she would have been exactly what he wanted. Beautiful, sophisticated, connected to all the right people. She represented everything he'd thought he needed when he'd walked away from Michelle. Now, her perfectly curated exterior seemed more like a warning than an attraction. "I need to do this my way," he said firmly. Victoria's expression hardened. "Be careful, Lorenzo. You're not the only one with connections in this city." She gathered her purse, moving toward the door. "That restaurant job of hers. It would be a shame if something happened to it." The threat, barely veiled, hung in the air between them. Lorenzo felt his hands clench into fists. "Don't," he warned. "Don't what?" Victoria's smile was perfectly pleasant. "I'm just concerned about your reputation. After all, what would people think if they knew you were involving yourself with a waitress, especially given the circumstances?" After she left, Lorenzo stood in his silent apartment, her words echoing in his head. 8 months ago, that kind of social pressure would have been enough to make him back down. Now it only strengthened his resolve. He picked up his phone, dialing a familiar number. "James, I need you to look into something for me. Le Blanc Restaurant. I want to know everything. Who owns it? Who makes the hiring decisions? Everything." He paused, glancing at a photo on his desk he hadn't been able to bring himself to remove. Himself and Michelle on their wedding day, both laughing at something now forgotten. "And I need you to set up an account, anonymous. Make sure Michelle Watson's medical bills are covered, retroactive to 8 months ago." It wasn't enough, not nearly enough, but it was a start. He had 8 months of cowardice to make up for, and this time he wouldn't let fear of scandal or social pressure stop him from doing what was right. As he ended the call, his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Think carefully about your next move. Some decisions can't be undone." Lorenzo deleted the message without responding. For the first time in 8 months, he was thinking clearly. The question wasn't whether he could undo his past decisions. He couldn't. The question was whether he had the courage to make better ones now. He opened his laptop again, pulling up his company's records. Somewhere in the merger documents was the truth about what had happened to Michelle at her firm. He had ignored it at the time, too focused on protecting his own interests. Now he had the resources and the motivation to uncover what had really happened. The sun climbed higher over Manhattan, casting long shadows across his desk. Lorenzo settled into work, knowing that before he could face Michelle, he needed to understand exactly what his silence had cost her. Only then could he begin to make things right. Michelle's tiny studio apartment in Queens felt especially cramped that morning as she struggled to get ready for her doctor's appointment. Her uniform from LeBlanc hung pressed and ready for her evening shift, a reminder of how far she'd fallen from her corner office at Richardson & Klein Law. The irony wasn't lost on her. She used to handle million-dollar corporate mergers, and now she could barely afford her prenatal vitamins. But pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore, not with another life depending on her. Her phone buzzed again, the fifth notification that morning about a mysterious deposit into her account. The amount would have covered all her medical bills with enough left over for 6 months' rent. She knew exactly who it was from. Lorenzo's guilt had always been expensive. Not this time, she muttered, already drafting another email to the bank to reject the transfer. The baby kicked, as if protesting her decision. Michelle placed a hand on her swollen belly, feeling the movement beneath her palm. "We don't need his money, little one. We've made it this far on our own." The subway ride to her doctor's office was uncomfortable, the morning rush leaving no seats available. Michelle gripped the overhead bar, trying to ignore the sympathetic glances from other passengers. A teenager finally offered his seat, and she accepted with a grateful smile, her back aching from last night's double shift. Dr. Patricia Chen's office was a welcome respite from the November chill. The receptionist looked up as Michelle entered, her expression unusually bright. "Mrs. Watson, your bills have been taken care of, all of them, including the next 3 visits." Michelle's heart sank. "By whom?" "The payment was processed through a health advocacy group." The receptionist beamed. "You're very fortunate." Fortunate. The word tasted bitter. Michelle knew there was no advocacy group, just Lorenzo, trying to sweep in and fix everything with his money, just like he always had. It was his way of maintaining control, of keeping things neat and manageable. In the examination room, Dr. Chen reviewed her vitals with growing concern. "Your blood pressure is elevated, Michelle. And you're still working those long shifts?" "I don't have a choice," Michelle replied, thinking of the bills piling up on her kitchen counter. "Actually," Dr. Chen said carefully, "I received a call from your insurance company. Your coverage has been retroactively upgraded to include disability leave. You could stop working today if you wanted to." Michelle closed her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. Lorenzo's fingerprints were everywhere, suffocating her with unwanted help. "I'll think about it," she lied. The baby's heartbeat filled the room strong and steady. Michelle watched the ultrasound screen, marveling at the tiny face that appeared to have Lorenzo's nose. She'd kept every printout from every visit, though she told herself it was just for medical records. Leaving the clinic, Michelle's phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize. Her finger hovered over the decline button, but something made her answer. Michelle Watson speaking. "Mrs. Watson, this is James Peterson, Mr. Richardson's attorney." Her grip tightened on the phone. "I have nothing to say to Lorenzo or his lawyers." "This isn't about Mr. Richardson," James said smoothly. "I'm calling about your wrongful termination from Richardson & Klein Law." Michelle stopped walking. "What?" "We've uncovered some concerning emails regarding your dismissal during the merger. There appears to have been significant discrimination involved. We'd like to discuss your options for legal recourse." The old Michelle, the lawyer Michelle, recognized the strategy immediately. "Let me guess," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Lorenzo found these emails." "Mrs. Watson, tell Lorenzo to stop. The health insurance, the bank transfers, and now this. I don't need his guilt money or his delayed justice." "This isn't about guilt," James insisted. "This is about—" Michelle ended the call, but her hands were shaking. 8 months ago, when she'd lost her job, Lorenzo had been conspicuously silent. He'd watched her fight the dismissal alone, had stood by as she'd been systematically pushed out of their social circle. Now he wanted to play the hero? Her phone buzzed with a text from her manager at LeBlanc. "Take the night off, with pay. Orders from above." That was the final straw. Michelle changed direction, heading toward the Upper West Side. It was time to end this. The doorman at Lorenzo's building recognized her. Of course he did, she'd lived there once, and let her up without calling ahead. The elevator ride to the penthouse gave her time to compose herself, to push down the hurt and anger that threatened to overwhelm her. Lorenzo opened the door on her first knock as if he'd been waiting. He looked different, tired, less polished than usual. His expression when he saw her was a mixture of hope and fear that made her heart ache despite everything. "Stop it," she said before he could speak. "Stop the payments, stop the insurance, stop having your lawyer call me, just stop." Michelle, no. She stepped into his apartment, memories washing over her. Sunday mornings reading the paper together, quiet dinners on the terrace. Moments when she'd actually believed they could bridge their different worlds. You don't get to sweep in and fix everything now. You lost that right when you chose your reputation over our marriage. Lorenzo flinched. I'm trying to make things right. By throwing money at me. By having your lawyer dredge up the past. Michelle's voice cracked. Where was this concern 8 months ago? Where were you when I was fighting for my career? When your friends were whispering about how you'd finally come to your senses about me? I was a coward, Lorenzo admitted quietly. I know that now. Michelle laughed, but there was no humor in it. Now? Now that I'm carrying your child? Now that your guilt finally outweighs your pride? Lorenzo stepped closer, his expression pained. How long have you known about the baby? Since 2 weeks after that night. Michelle wrapped her arms protectively around herself. I tried to tell you, but you were too busy to take my calls. Then I saw the society pages. You with Victoria Bennett at the Metropolitan Gala. You looked happy, unburdened. I wasn't, Lorenzo said softly. I'm not. A kick from the baby made Michelle gasp, her hand going automatically to her belly. Lorenzo moved as if to touch her, then stopped himself, his hand hanging awkwardly in the air between them. It's a boy, Michelle said, watching Lorenzo's face transform with wonder. Due in January, and he's fine, healthy, no thanks to your recent interference. Let me help, Lorenzo pleaded. Not with money, not with lawyers. Just let me be there, for both of you. Michelle stepped back, creating distance between them. Why? Because your new girlfriend saw me at the restaurant. Because now you have to acknowledge what you've been avoiding for months. Because it's the right thing to do. The right thing? Michelle's voice rose. The right thing would have been standing by me when I needed you. The right thing would have been facing our challenges together, instead of running away to your safe, wealthy white world, where everything is perfect and controlled. Lorenzo's face fell. Michelle, please. No. She moved toward the door, her dignity the only thing keeping her upright. I don't need your guilt, Lorenzo. I don't need your money or your lawyers or your delayed attempts at doing the right thing. What I needed was my husband, and you chose not to be that. She left him standing in his perfect apartment, surrounded by all the things he'd chosen over their marriage. In the elevator, she finally let the tears fall, one hand pressed against her belly, where their son moved restlessly. It's okay, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to the baby or herself. We're okay on our own. We have to be. Victoria Bennett sat in her father's oak-paneled office, her composure perfect despite the storm brewing inside her. The private investigator's report lay open on the mahogany desk between them, its contents more threatening than she'd anticipated. Well? Richard Bennett's voice carried the weight of old money and expectations. What do you plan to do about this situation? Victoria traced a manicured finger along the report's edge. Lorenzo is just confused, Daddy. The pregnancy has triggered some sort of misplaced guilt. Once I handle his ex-wife, everything will return to normal. Handle her? Richard's eyebrow arched. Be careful, Victoria. The Watson woman was a corporate lawyer. She's not some naive socialite you can simply intimidate. Was a corporate lawyer, Victoria corrected, standing to pour herself a drink. Now she's a waitress at LeBlanc, barely making ends meet. Trust me, everyone has a breaking point. And Lorenzo? Victoria's grip tightened on her glass. Leave Lorenzo to me. Across town, Lorenzo sat in his office at Richardson Global, staring at the emails he'd uncovered. Each message revealed another layer of the systematic discrimination that had forced Michelle out of her firm during the merger. Names he knew, people he'd considered friends, had orchestrated her downfall with surgical precision. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Richardson, Miss Bennett is here to see you. Lorenzo exhaled slowly. Send her in. Victoria entered like she owned the place, her Louboutins clicking against the hardwood floors. We need to talk about your little project. My what? Don't play coy. She perched on his desk, ignoring the chair. I know you've been investigating Michelle's dismissal. Do you really think stirring up that scandal will help anyone? Lorenzo leaned back, studying her. How do you know about that? I know everything that happens in our circle, darling. It's what makes me such a valuable partner. She reached for his hand, but he withdrew it. I'm worried about you. This obsession with your ex-wife isn't healthy. It's not an obsession. It's justice. Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. Justice? Please. She knew what she was getting into, marrying above her station. These things rarely work out. Above her station? Lorenzo's voice turned cold. Michelle graduated top of her class at Columbia. She was making partner before she got too ambitious, Victoria cut in. Before she forgot her place. Lorenzo stood abruptly. I think you should leave. Gladly. But first, Victoria pulled an envelope from her designer bag. You should see these. The photos inside showed Michelle entering an upscale apartment building, being greeted warmly by a well-dressed man. More photos showed them having dinner, talking intimately. Your private investigator has been busy, Lorenzo said flatly. Actually, these are from 6 months ago when you were still technically married. Victoria's smile was venomous. Makes you wonder about that baby, doesn't it? Lorenzo's hand crushed the photos. Get out. Think about it, Lorenzo. Why else would she refuse your help? Your money? Unless... Victoria let the implication hang in the air. I'm just trying to protect you. After she left, Lorenzo stared at the crumpled photos. The man's face nagged at his memory. He'd seen him somewhere before. His phone was ringing before he consciously made the decision to call his own investigator. James, I need everything you can find on this man, and Victoria Bennett. I want to know every move she makes. Across the city, Michelle's day was unraveling. She arrived at LeBlanc to find her manager, Robert, waiting with an uncomfortable expression. Michelle, we need to talk about some complaints. Complaints? She'd never received a single complaint in her 8 months working there. Several high-profile customers have raised concerns about... Robert shifted uncomfortably. About your professionalism. Michelle's hand went instinctively to her belly. This is about my pregnancy? No. No, of course not. That would be discrimination. Robert wouldn't meet her eyes. It's about other things. What other things? There have been allegations of inappropriate behavior with male customers. The accusation hit her like a physical blow. That's ridiculous. Nevertheless, we have to take these complaints seriously. I'm placing you on unpaid leave, pending an investigation. Michelle recognized the tactic. She'd seen it used against other employees when she was practicing law. Create a scandal, force them out, avoid wrongful termination suits. Victoria's fingerprints were all over this. I need this job, Robert. His expression softened slightly. I know, but my hands are tied. The complaints came from some very influential people. Outside, the November wind cut through her coat as Michelle walked to the subway station. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Consider this a warning. Walk away now or things will get much worse. She was still staring at the message when someone called her name. Looking up, she found herself face to face with Daniel Martinez, the man from Victoria's photos. I wondered if I'd see you here, he said, his expression grave. We need to talk about Lorenzo Richardson. Michelle's instincts screamed danger, but her legal training recognized an opportunity. Why? Because I know what really happened during that merger, and I know what Victoria Bennett is capable of. He glanced around nervously. But not here. Too many eyes. The diner on 32nd, Michelle suggested. In an hour. Daniel nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Michelle immediately called her old friend from law school, Rachel Chen. I need you to meet me at Jerry's diner. Bring your phone and be ready to record. She paused. And Rachel, don't tell anyone where you're going. The diner was nearly empty when Michelle arrived. Rachel was already there, seated at a booth with clear sightlines to the door. They'd worked enough cases together to know the drill. Daniel arrived exactly on time, sliding into the booth across from them. His expensive suit seemed out of place among the formica tables and vinyl seats. Victoria Bennett approached me last week, he began without preamble. She wanted me to corroborate her story about an affair between us 6 months ago, offered me a considerable sum to play along. Michelle's heart raced. Why are you telling me this? Because 8 months ago I was on the merger team that pushed you out of Richardson and Klein. I followed orders, helped build the case against you. But this? He shook his head. This is too far. You were on the merger team. Michelle's mind raced. Then you saw the emails. I saw everything. The coded language about cultural fit, the manufactured complaints, the way they isolated you. He pulled out a thumb drive. I kept copies. Insurance, I thought. Never imagined I'd actually use them. Rachel's phone was recording every word. Michelle leaned forward. Why now? Because Victoria Bennett isn't just trying to discredit you. She's trying to destroy you. Daniel's voice dropped. And she's not working alone. Her father's firm has been circling Richardson Global for months. This whole thing, you, the baby, the scandal, it's all part of their plan to force a merger. Michelle sat back, the pieces clicking into place. They want to use me to discredit Lorenzo, make him look unstable, unreliable. Exactly. Once his position is weakened, the board will push for new leadership, Michelle finished, and Richard Bennett will be there to save the company. Daniel stood, leaving the thumb drive on the table. I never gave you this. We never had this conversation. After he left, Rachel picked up the drive. Well, counselor, what's our next move? Michelle stared at her phone at the warning message still displayed on the screen. She thought of Lorenzo, probably sitting in his office right now, looking at Victoria's manufactured evidence and doubting everything. First, she said, we verify everything on that drive. Then, her hand rested on her belly, feeling their son move. Then we show Victoria Bennett exactly why you don't try to outmaneuver a pregnant lawyer with nothing left to lose. James Peterson laid 3 files on Lorenzo's desk, each one thicker than the last. You're not going to like what we found, he warned. Lorenzo loosened his tie, a headache building behind his eyes. The past 48 hours had been a blur of revelations and regrets. Tell me. First, Daniel Martinez. James opened the top file. He wasn't having an affair with Michelle. He was part of the merger team that orchestrated her dismissal from Richardson and Klein. Those photos Victoria showed you? Completely staged. We have proof they were taken last week, not 6 months ago. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. And Victoria? That's where it gets interesting. James pulled out a series of financial documents. The Bennett family has been quietly buying up shares in Richardson Global through shell companies. They're positioning for a hostile takeover, using me as the weak link. Lorenzo finished, the pieces falling into place. Victoria's been playing me from the start. There's more. James hesitated. We found evidence that Richard Bennett was behind Michelle's dismissal from Richardson and Klein. The whole thing was orchestrated to isolate you, make you more susceptible to Victoria's influence. Lorenzo stood, anger coursing through him. All those months he'd spent doubting Michelle, questioning their relationship, when the whole thing had been an elaborate manipulation. Does Michelle know any of this? Actually, James shifted uncomfortably. She might know more than we do. Our sources say she's been building a case. She still has friends in the legal community, and they've been gathering evidence. Of course she had. Even without resources, even pregnant and working as a waitress, Michelle was still the most capable person he knew. While he'd been wallowing in guilt and self-pity, she'd been fighting back. Sir? His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Bennett is here to see you. Lorenzo exchanged looks with James. Perfect timing. Stay close. Victoria entered with her usual confidence, but Lorenzo noticed something new in her eyes, a hint of desperation. Darling, we need to talk about the company's direction. Daddy's very concerned about some of your recent decisions. Is he? Lorenzo remained standing, letting her take in his cold expression. Like investigating Michelle's dismissal, or uncovering your family's attempt at a hostile takeover. Victoria's smile faltered for just a moment. I don't know what you're talking about. The photos were a nice touch, Lorenzo continued. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate Daniel Martinez, that I wouldn't find out about your father's involvement in destroying Michelle's career? Lorenzo, you're not thinking clearly. Victoria moved closer, her voice honey-sweet. This obsession with your ex-wife is exactly why the board is concerned. You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. No, Lorenzo's voice was steel. For the first time in months, I'm seeing everything perfectly clearly, including you. Victoria's facade cracked. You ungrateful bastard. Do you have any idea what I've done for you? The connections I've brought? The doors I've opened? While systematically trying to destroy the mother of my child. That waitress? Victoria spat. She'll ruin everything you've built. Your reputation, your position in society. Get out. Lorenzo's voice was deadly quiet. And tell your father that if he wants my company, he'll have to fight for it in the open. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You'll regret this. By the time I'm done, you'll lose everything, your company, your reputation, and that precious baby you're so concerned about. As she stormed out, Lorenzo's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Michelle. Across town, Michelle sat in Rachel's law office, surrounded by evidence of the Bennett schemes. Her back ached from hours of reviewing documents, but she couldn't stop now, not when they were so close to exposing everything. The board meeting is tomorrow, Rachel reminded her. If we're going to move, it has to be now. Michelle nodded, one hand resting on her belly. The baby had been active all day, as if sensing the tension. Do we have enough? More than enough. Rachel gestured to the evidence spread across her desk. Emails proving the discrimination, financial records showing the shell companies, witness statements about Victoria's attempts at character assassination. The Bennetts aren't just facing civil suits. There could be criminal charges. They'll try to bury it, Michelle warned. They have too many connections, too much influence. Not this time. Rachel's grin was fierce. Because this time we have something they don't expect. Lorenzo's cooperation. Michelle's phone lit up with Lorenzo's response. Name the time and place. They met at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from their usual haunts. Lorenzo arrived first, and Michelle felt a flutter in her chest when she saw him, not from lingering attraction, but from the recognition of how much had changed. He looked different somehow, more genuine without his usual polish. "Thank you for coming," she said, lowering herself carefully into the chair across from him. "Michelle, He started, but she held up a hand. "Let me go first." She pulled out a thumb drive. "This contains everything we've gathered on the Bennetts, their manipulation of the merger, the systematic discrimination, Victoria's recent schemes. They're trying to take your company, Lorenzo." "I know." He met her eyes. "James showed me the evidence this morning." "But that's not why you called me here, is it?" Michelle took a deep breath. "No, I called because despite everything, I don't want to see your company destroyed. The Bennetts aren't just coming after you. They're planning to dismantle Richardson Global, sell it off piece by piece. Hundreds of people would lose their jobs. You still care about the company. I care about justice." Michelle's voice was firm. "What they did to me was wrong, but it's bigger than that now. They've done this to others, destroyed lives and careers for profit. Someone needs to stop them." Lorenzo leaned forward. "We need to stop them. Together." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Michelle studied his face, looking for any trace of the man who had abandoned her 8 months ago. Instead, she saw something new: determination, regret, and a fierce desire to make things right. "The board meeting tomorrow," she said finally. "They're planning to force a vote of no confidence in your leadership. But if we present our evidence first, we can turn the tables." Lorenzo nodded. "But Michelle, you should know. Going public with this could get ugly. Victoria's already threatened. I'm not afraid of Victoria Bennett." Michelle's hand went to her belly as their son kicked. "I'm done being afraid." Lorenzo's eyes followed her movement. How is he?" Michelle's expression softened slightly. "Active, strong, like he's ready for a fight. Just like his mother." The words were quiet, tinged with admiration and regret. "Lorenzo," Michelle met his gaze steadily, "if we do this, we do it as allies, nothing more. I'm not ready to forgive you, and I'm not sure I ever will be, but I am ready to fight back." He nodded, accepting her terms. "What do you need from me?" "Everything you have on the merger, the board members' voting records, any communication with the Bennetts, and," she hesitated, "I need you to stand up in that boardroom tomorrow and tell the truth, about everything, including how I failed you. Especially that." Lorenzo reached across the table, not touching her, but leaving his hand palm up. "An offer, not a demand. I won't let you down, not this time." Michelle didn't take his hand, but she did give him a small nod. "Good, because tomorrow we go to war." The Richardson Global boardroom hummed with tension as dawn broke over Manhattan. Lorenzo stood at the window, watching board members file in, their faces carefully neutral. Each had received an anonymous envelope the previous evening, containing just enough evidence to make them nervous. Richard Bennett strode in like he already owned the place, Victoria close behind. They took their seats near the head of the table, twin expressions of smug confidence on their faces. Lorenzo noticed Victoria's slight frown when she saw the empty chair reserved for special counsel. "Shall we begin?" Richard's voice carried the weight of assumed victory. "I believe we have some concerns to address about the company's current leadership." Lorenzo turned from the window. "Actually, we're waiting for one more person." The boardroom doors opened and Michelle entered. The room fell silent. She wore a precisely tailored maternity suit that emphasized rather than concealed her pregnancy, her head held high as she walked to the special counsel's chair. Victoria's face went pale. "What is she doing here?" Richard demanded. "Mrs. Watson Richardson has been asked to present evidence regarding certain irregular business practices," Lorenzo said calmly. "As a former partner at Richardson & Klein and a shareholder in Richardson Global, she has every right to be here." Michelle opened her laptop, connecting it to the room's display system. Her hands were steady, but Lorenzo could see the tension in her shoulders. They had spent hours preparing for this moment, knowing they would only get one chance. "Before we begin," Victoria cut in, "I think the board should be aware of the personal situation clouding Mr. Richardson's judgment." "You mean my pregnancy?" Michelle's voice was cool. "Or the systematic discrimination that forced me out of Richardson & Klein during the merger. Don't worry, Ms. Bennett, we'll be discussing all of it. The first slide appeared on the screen, a complex web of shell companies all leading back to Bennett Industries. Michelle walked the board through the evidence methodically, her legal training evident in every precise word and carefully structured argument. Over the past year, she explained, Bennett Industries has been quietly acquiring shares in Richardson Global through these shell companies. This alone isn't illegal, though it should have been reported once they exceeded 5% ownership. But then we found this. The next slides revealed emails between Richard Bennett and board members, detailing their plan to force Lorenzo out. Victoria shifted uncomfortably as Michelle highlighted specific passages. Note the timestamp on these emails, Michelle continued. They predate my dismissal from Richardson and Klein. In fact, they predate the merger itself. The plan was always to weaken Richardson Global from within, starting with removing potential obstacles. This is ridiculous, Richard interrupted. You can't possibly expect the board to take the word of a disgraced lawyer turned waitress. No, Lorenzo stepped forward. I expect them to take the word of our external auditors, who have verified every document, and the SEC, which received copies of everything this morning. Victoria stood abruptly. This is a waste of time. We're here to discuss Lorenzo's fitness to lead, not indulge conspiracy theories from his bitter ex-wife. Interesting choice of words, Michelle said, pulling up a new document. Let's talk about bitterness, Ms. Bennett. Specifically, your attempts to fabricate evidence of an affair between me and Daniel Martinez. The boardroom erupted in murmurs as Michelle played a recording of Martinez confessing to Victoria's bribery attempt. Victoria's composure cracked. You recorded him. That's illegal. New York is a one-party consent state, Michelle corrected, and Mr. Martinez was very eager to clear his conscience. In fact, he provided quite detailed information about the merger team's activities. Richard Bennett's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is all circumstantial. You have no proof of any wrongdoing. Actually, Lorenzo pressed a button on the conference phone. We do. James, the SEC has just announced a formal investigation into Bennett Industries. James's voice filled the room. Trading of their shares has been temporarily suspended. The boardroom exploded into chaos. Board members began whispering urgently among themselves. Victoria grabbed her father's arm, her face stricken. Richard Bennett stood, pointing at Lorenzo. This isn't over. You have no idea what you're doing. No, Mr. Bennett. Michelle's voice cut through the noise. You have no idea what you've done. This isn't just about Richardson Global anymore. We've uncovered similar patterns at 3 other companies you've acquired. The SEC is very interested in that pattern. You're bluffing, Victoria snapped, but her voice wavered. Michelle smiled and Lorenzo recognized the expression. It was the same one she'd worn in court just before delivering a killing blow. Would you like to see the evidence from those cases as well? We have another 3 hours reserved for this meeting. Richard Bennett stormed out, pulling Victoria with him. The board sat in stunned silence until the chairman cleared his throat. I believe we should recess for 30 minutes to process this information. As the board members filed out, Lorenzo approached Michelle. That was incredible. Save it, she said, but without real anger. We're not done yet. They'll try to spin this, claim it's all a personal vendetta. Let them try. Lorenzo gestured to the evidence still displayed on the screen. The truth is out now. They can't bury it again. Michelle began gathering her materials, then stopped suddenly, pressing a hand to her side. Lorenzo stepped forward in alarm. Are you okay? He's just active today, she said, then saw Lorenzo's genuine concern. Do you want to feel? Lorenzo hesitated, then placed his hand where she indicated. Their son kicked strongly, and Lorenzo's eyes widened with wonder. He really is a fighter, he whispered. The moment was broken by Lorenzo's phone buzzing. He checked it and frowned. Victoria's calling an emergency press conference in an hour. Of course she is. Michelle straightened, professional mask back in place. She'll try to paint this as a domestic dispute gone public. We need to get ahead of it. I can call our PR team. No, Michelle cut him off. Let me handle it. I think it's time everyone heard from the disgraced lawyer-turned-waitress directly. Lorenzo studied her face. Are you sure? Once you go public, there's no going back. The media will be relentless. I've spent 8 months hiding, Lorenzo, taking their abuse in silence. No more. She gathered her files with determination. Call a press conference for 15 minutes before Victoria's. And get me everything you have on the other companies Bennett Industries has targeted. If they want a war, I'll give them one. As she turned to leave, Lorenzo called after her. Michelle, thank you for helping save my company. She paused at the door. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because it's right. Then softer, but you're welcome. Watching her leave, Lorenzo realized something had shifted between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps understanding. His phone buzzed again, James with updates about the SEC investigation. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in months, Lorenzo felt like he was finally fighting for the right things. The Richardson Global press room buzzed with anticipation. Journalists packed the space, smartphones and cameras ready, hungry for the promised revelation. Michelle stood in the adjacent room, reviewing her notes one final time, while Rachel helped adjust her suit jacket. Victoria just arrived at her venue, Rachel reported, checking her phone. She's brought the full Bennett PR team. Good. Michelle touched her belly for reassurance as their son moved. Let her waste time setting up the perfect image. We're going for substance. Lorenzo entered, his tie slightly askew from rushing. The SEC has officially announced their investigation. It's hitting the news now. Perfect timing. Michelle checked her watch. Ready to play your part? He nodded, though concern lined his face. Are you sure about this? The media can be brutal, especially with a pregnant black woman taking on one of New York's most powerful families. Michelle's smile was sharp. That's exactly why we need to do this. The Bennetts have controlled the narrative long enough. The buzz in the press room increased as Lorenzo stepped up to the podium. Cameras flashed as he adjusted the microphone. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. Recent events have raised questions about Richardson Global's leadership and future. Rather than let rumors and speculation spread, we believe in addressing these matters directly. He paused, making eye contact with key reporters. To that end, I'd like to introduce someone who can speak to these issues with unique insight and authority, Michelle Watson Richardson. The room erupted in whispers as Michelle walked to the podium. She could hear the rapid-fire clicks of cameras, see the recognition dawn on faces as reporters connected her name to the society pages from a year ago, the pregnant ex-wife, now standing shoulder to shoulder with her former husband. Good morning, she began, her voice clear and steady. My name is Michelle Watson Richardson. Until 8 months ago, I was a partner at Richardson & Klein Law, specializing in corporate governance and securities law. Today I stand before you not just as Lorenzo Richardson's ex-wife, but as a witness to and victim of corporate manipulation, discrimination, and fraud. She laid out the evidence methodically, watching the reporter's expressions shift from skepticism to shock. The shell companies, the coordinated discrimination, Victoria's attempts at character assassination, the larger pattern of Bennett Industries' predatory practices. This isn't just about my dismissal or Richardson Global, she emphasized. This is about a systematic abuse of power that has affected multiple companies, destroyed countless careers, and hurt ordinary investors. The documents being distributed now show similar patterns at 3 other firms targeted by Bennett Industries. A reporter's hand shot up. Ms. Watson Richardson, are you suggesting that your pregnancy influenced these events? No, Michelle replied firmly. I'm stating that Bennett Industries used my pregnancy as one of many tools in their attempt to destabilize Richardson Global. They assumed that a pregnant black woman would be an easy target, that I would stay quiet, accept their discrimination, and fade away. They were wrong. Another reporter called out, Mr. Richardson, when did you become aware of these allegations? Lorenzo stepped forward. I became fully aware recently, and I take full responsibility for my failure to recognize and stop these practices sooner. My personal bias and fear of scandal made me complicit in the discrimination against my own wife. It's a failure I intend to rectify, starting with full cooperation with the SEC investigation. Across town, Victoria Bennett watched the press conference on a monitor, her face growing paler with each revelation. Her carefully planned counter-narrative was crumbling before she could even present it. Do something, she hissed at their PR team. Like what? Her chief strategist demanded. They have documentation, witnesses, SEC backing. If we go out there now with denial and character assassination, we'll look desperate. Back at Richardson Global, Michelle fielded questions with precision, never letting the reporters drift from the core issues. When one asked about her current job at LeBlanc, she turned it into a powerful moment. Yes, I'm currently working as a waitress, not because I'm unqualified for corporate law, but because systematic discrimination made it impossible for me to continue in my field. My story is not unique. The documents before you show dozens of similar cases, qualified professionals pushed out to facilitate Bennett Industries' takeover attempts. A veteran reporter stood. Mrs. Watson Richardson, sources say you rejected multiple settlement offers from both Richardson Global and Bennett Industries. Why come forward now? Michelle's hand rested on her belly as she answered, because some things are more important than money. Justice, truth, the example we set for the next generation. She met Lorenzo's eyes briefly, and because sometimes doing what's right means facing your fears and speaking truth to power. The questions continued for another 30 minutes. Through it all, Michelle remained poised, turning each potential attack into an opportunity to reinforce their message. When she finally stepped away from the podium, the room erupted in more questions, but she was done. She had accomplished what she came to do. In the private room, Rachel was grinning at her phone. Victoria just cancelled her press conference. Officially, she's reviewing the serious allegations and will respond appropriately through legal channels. Of course she is, Michelle said, finally allowing herself to sink into a chair. The baby was particularly active, as if celebrating their victory. She knows anything she says now will only make things worse. Lorenzo entered, closing the door on the clamoring press. That was incredible. You were incredible. Don't, Michelle warned. This isn't about us. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their marriage, his tell when he was struggling with emotion. But watching you out there, seeing your strength, I was an idiot, Michelle, a coward. Yes, you were. She met his gaze steadily. But that's not what matters now. What matters is what we do next. The board wants to meet again, he reported. They're talking about creating an ethics committee with real oversight power. They want you to head it. Michelle raised an eyebrow. As a waitress? As a lawyer, a partner if you want it. He held up a hand as she started to protest. Not because of our history or the baby or even today's press conference, because you're the best person for the job, because you've proven you'll fight for what's right, no matter the personal cost. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a news alert. The stock price of Bennett Industries was plummeting. Richard Bennett was stepping down as CEO pending the SEC investigation. Victoria had been seen leaving their offices with a security escort. It's starting, Rachel said softly. The fall of the House of Bennett. Michelle felt no satisfaction, only a weary determination. The real work starts now. Other companies, other victims will come forward. The Bennett's entire empire will be under scrutiny. And you'll be at the center of it, Lorenzo noted. The media won't let this go. They'll dig into everything. Our marriage, the divorce, the baby. Let them. Michelle stood, gathering her strength. I'm done hiding. Done being afraid. Done letting powerful people hurt others because we're too scared to stand up. She touched her belly, feeling their son move. I want him to grow up in a world where justice matters more than privilege, where doing what's right isn't just a slogan, but a reality. Rachel touched her arm. You need rest. Today was intense. The doctor's appointment, Lorenzo remembered suddenly. You were supposed to have a checkup this afternoon. Michelle blinked, surprised he'd remembered. I rescheduled for tomorrow. Let me drive you, he offered. Please, after everything today, just let me do this one thing. She studied him for a long moment, seeing not the polished executive or the apologetic ex-husband, but simply a man trying to do better. Okay, she said finally, but just the drive. I'm not ready for more. He nodded, accepting her terms. As they left the building, reporters called out questions, cameras flashed, but Michelle kept her head high. She had spoken her truth, fought her battle. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same strength and dignity that had brought her this far. Victoria Bennett sat in her father's darkened study, a glass of untouched scotch before her, watching the financial news dissect their empire's collapse. Richard Bennett had fled to their house in the Hamptons, leaving her to weather the storm alone. The reporter's voice droned on about stock prices and investor confidence, but Victoria focused on the image they kept showing. Michelle at the podium, powerful and pregnant, destroying everything Victoria had worked for. Her phone buzzed, another message from their lawyers advising silence and cooperation. Victoria deleted it without reading. They didn't understand. This wasn't just about money or power anymore. This was personal. Across town, Michelle's small apartment felt especially cramped with Rachel and Lorenzo both present. Papers spread across every surface as they prepared for the next phase of the investigation. The SEC wants your testimony first thing Monday, Rachel said, sorting through documents. They're particularly interested in the pattern you identified at the other companies. Michelle nodded, trying to find a comfortable position on her worn couch. The baby was restless tonight, picking up on her tension. What about the discrimination claims? The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is opening a separate investigation, Lorenzo reported, loosening his tie. They've already received calls from former employees at 2 other Bennett-controlled companies. It's happening faster than we expected, Rachel noted. The Bennett's whole house of cards is collapsing, which makes them dangerous, Michelle said quietly. Victoria won't go down without a fight. As if summoned by her words, Michelle's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. The image made her blood run cold. A photo of her doctor's office, taken that morning with the text, "Shame if anything happened to your prenatal records." Lorenzo saw her expression change. "What is it?" Michelle handed him the phone wordlessly. His face darkened as he read the message. "I'll increase your security detail," he said immediately. "I don't want—" "Please," he cut her off, his voice raw with emotion. "Let me protect you this time. Both of you." Before she could respond, Rachel's laptop pinged with a news alert. She clicked it, and the room filled with Victoria's voice from a hastily called press conference. "While we take these allegations seriously," Victoria was saying, her composure perfect despite everything, "we can't ignore the personal nature of these attacks. Mrs. Watson Richardson's relationship with my fiancé—" "Fiancé?" Michelle's eyebrows shot up. "She's lying," Lorenzo said quickly. "We never—" "I know," Michelle cut him off. "But she's playing to win. An engagement story makes me look like a bitter ex-wife trying to ruin her replacement." Rachel was already typing furiously. "We can counter this. Release the evidence about her involvement in the discrimination." "No," Michelle said firmly. "We stick to the facts. The corporate fraud, the SEC investigation, the pattern of discrimination. Let her play personal games. It only makes her look desperate." Lorenzo's phone buzzed. James with an urgent update. His face grew grave as he listened. "What?" Michelle demanded. "Victoria's filed an emergency petition," he said slowly. "She's trying to get the court to freeze all investigation materials, pending a review of potential personal bias." "Can she do that?" Rachel demanded. "She can try," Michelle said, her legal mind already racing. "She's hoping to delay things long enough to destroy evidence. We need to—" She stopped suddenly, pressing a hand to her side with a sharp intake of breath. "Michelle?" Lorenzo was at her side instantly. "I'm fine," she said, but her face was pale. Just a twinge. "You need rest," Rachel insisted. "We can handle this tonight. The petition—" "We'll wait until morning," Lorenzo said firmly. "Rachel's right. You need rest." Michelle wanted to argue, but another wave of discomfort made her reconsider. "Fine, but first thing tomorrow?" "First thing tomorrow you have a doctor's appointment," Lorenzo reminded her. "I'll pick you up at 8. She started to protest, then saw the genuine concern in his eyes. "Okay, but after that we deal with Victoria's petition." After Rachel and Lorenzo left, Michelle tried to sleep, but her mind kept racing. Victoria's threat about the medical records worried her more than she'd let on. The baby moved again, gentler this time, and she rubbed her belly soothingly. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." Her phone lit up with another message. This time, it was an email from an encrypted address. The attachment showed financial records, transfers from Bennett Industries to someone at her doctor's office. Michelle's hands shook as she dialed Lorenzo's number. "They're already in my medical records," she said without preamble. "Victoria has someone at the doctor's office on payroll." His sharp intake of breath told her he understood the implications. "I'm coming to get you. Now. We'll find a new doctor." "No," Michelle cut him off. "We use this. Set a trap. It's too dangerous." "Listen to me," she insisted. "Victoria's desperate. She's making mistakes. If we can catch her trying to tamper with medical records, you want to use yourself as bait." His voice rose with concern. "Use our child as bait." The word "our" hung between them, heavy with meaning. "I want to end this," Michelle said quietly, "before she can hurt anyone else. You know I'm right." The silence stretched for a long moment before Lorenzo spoke again. "What do you need me to do?" They spent the next hour planning, Lorenzo conferring with James while Michelle coordinated with Rachel. By the time they finished, it was well past midnight. "Try to sleep," Lorenzo urged before hanging up. "I'll see you at 8. Michelle lay in bed, one hand on her belly, feeling their son's movements. "Your father's right about one thing," she murmured. "This is dangerous, but sometimes fighting for what's right means taking risks." The baby kicked as if in agreement. Morning came too quickly. Michelle dressed carefully, selecting a suit that projected both professionalism and vulnerability. She wasn't surprised to find Lorenzo waiting outside her building at 7:45, looking like he hadn't slept either. "Ready?" he asked as she got into his car. She nodded, checking her phone one last time. Rachel had everything in place at her end. James had coordinated with hospital security. Now they just had to spring the trap. "Michelle," Lorenzo said as they drove, "if anything feels wrong, anything at all, we pull the plug. Promise me." She studied his profile, seeing the tension in his jaw, the worry in his eyes. "I promise." They pulled into the hospital parking garage just as another message arrived from the encrypted address. "Hope your appointment goes well. Accidents can happen so easily during high-risk pregnancies." Michelle showed Lorenzo the message. His hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. "It's working," she said softly. "She's getting sloppy, desperate. I still don't like using you as bait." "I'm not bait," Michelle corrected him. "I'm the hunter. Victoria just doesn't know it yet." As they walked toward the hospital entrance, Michelle spotted a familiar face pretending to read a newspaper. James, positioned exactly where they'd planned. Two more security team members were inside, dressed as hospital staff. "Ready?" Lorenzo asked one final time. Michelle straightened her shoulders, head high. "Let's go catch a snake." The hospital corridor felt unnaturally quiet as Michelle followed the nurse, actually one of James's security team, toward the examination room. Lorenzo waited in the reception area, maintaining their carefully crafted appearance of distance. Everything had been meticulously planned, but Michelle's heart still raced as she watched the trap begin to unfold. The fake nurse, Lisa, made a show of checking Michelle's blood pressure. "It's a bit elevated," she said, loud enough for the real medical assistant passing by to hear. "I'm not surprised," Michelle replied, following the script. "It's been a stressful week." Lisa left her alone in the examination room, door slightly ajar, an invitation to anyone watching. Through her earpiece, disguised as a hearing aid, Michelle could hear James's team coordinating their positions. "Target spotted," a voice whispered. "Victoria Bennett just entered through the staff entrance. She's with someone from the records department." Michelle forced herself to remain still, though her instinct was to move, to act. The baby kicked, perhaps sensing her tension. "Approaching your floor now," another voice reported. "Stand by." Footsteps in the hallway, voices murmuring. Michelle pulled out her phone, pretending to be absorbed in emails while her hidden camera recorded everything. The door opened wider, and a hospital employee Michelle didn't recognize entered, looking nervous. "Mrs. Watson Richardson, we need to update some insurance information." "Of course," Michelle said pleasantly, noting how the woman's hand shook as she clutched a tablet. "I just need your signature." "Stop!" The command came from the doorway, where Lorenzo now stood, his face tight with controlled anger. "Step away from her." The woman froze. Behind Lorenzo, James appeared with two uniformed police officers. Down the hall, Michelle could hear Victoria's voice rising in protest as more officers approached her. "Mrs. Cole," James addressed the hospital employee, "would you like to explain why you were about to present Mrs. Watson Richardson with falsified medical documents? Documents that would have incorrectly labeled her pregnancy as dangerously high risk?" The woman's face crumpled. "Ms. Bennett said she promised to pay off your gambling debts," James finished. "We know, we have the transfer records. Everything happened quickly after that." Mrs. Cole broke down crying, confessing everything. Victoria's shouts echoed through the corridor as she was led away in handcuffs, her threats now tinged with hysteria. "You think this changes anything?" Victoria spat as she passed Michelle's door. "You're nothing. You'll always be nothing." Michelle stepped into the doorway, one hand protectively on her belly. "No, Victoria, I'm just getting started." After the police left with Victoria and Mrs. Cole, after James's team swept the hospital for any other compromised employees, after all the statements had been taken, Michelle finally allowed herself to sink into a chair, exhaustion washing over her. "The doctor's on her way," Lorenzo said softly. "A real one this time. James vetted her personally." Michelle nodded, still processing how close they'd come to disaster. If they hadn't uncovered Victoria's plan, if the falsified records had been entered into the system. "Stop," Lorenzo said, reading her expression. "We caught them. You're safe. Both of you are safe." The baby kicked again, harder this time. Michelle winced. "What's wrong?" Lorenzo's voice sharpened with concern. "He's just active today, probably picking up on all the excitement." But even as she said it, Michelle felt something different, a tightening sensation that didn't feel quite right. The new doctor, Dr. Wilson, arrived before Lorenzo could press further. Her examination was thorough and professional. but her expression grew increasingly concerned as she reviewed the monitor readings. "Mrs. Watson-Richardson," she said finally, "you're experiencing early contractions. Not labor yet, but your body is under significant stress. I'm admitting you for observation." "No," Michelle started to protest. "I have to be in court tomorrow for the emergency hearing." "The only place you have to be is in a hospital bed," Dr. Wilson said firmly. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high, and these contractions could progress to preterm labor if we don't get them under control." Lorenzo stepped forward. "I'll handle the hearing. Rachel can present the new evidence about Victoria's attempt to falsify medical records. You focus on staying healthy." Michelle wanted to argue, but another contraction, she could no longer deny that's what they were, made her grab the examination table's edge. The monitor's beeping increased rapidly. "That's it," Dr. Wilson decided. "We're moving you to maternity now, no arguments." Everything became a blur of activity. Nurses appeared with a wheelchair. Forms were signed. Through it all, Lorenzo stayed close, his face etched with worry. In the private room, after she'd been hooked up to monitors and given medication to stop the contractions, Michelle finally allowed herself to face the fear she'd been suppressing. "This is my fault," she said quietly. "I pushed too hard, took too many risks." "No." Lorenzo pulled a chair close to her bed. "This is Victoria's fault, and mine, for not stopping her sooner. The hearing will be handled," he assured her. "Focus on our son, our son." The words still felt strange, but right somehow. The monitors showed the baby's heartbeat, strong and steady despite everything. "I need you to do something for me," Michelle said after a moment. "Anything. In my apartment, there's a box in the closet. It has all the ultrasound pictures, every doctor's note, every little milestone." She met his eyes. "I kept them for him so he'd know, so he'd have the whole story. Will you bring them?" Lorenzo's eyes filled with tears. He quickly blinked away. "Of course. I'll go now." "Wait!" Michelle caught his hand as another contraction made her breath catch. "There's something else you should know. I've been having these dreams about the baby. In every one, I'm calling him William, after my grandfather." "William," Lorenzo repeated softly. "It's perfect." The moment was interrupted by Michelle's phone buzzing with an urgent news alert. Lorenzo picked it up before she could reach for it. "Don't," he said. "Whatever it is can wait. Tell me." He hesitated, then relented. Richard Bennett was found unconscious in his Hamptons house. Apparent suicide attempt. Michelle closed her eyes. Despite everything the Bennetts had done, she felt no satisfaction in their destruction. "Their whole empire's crumbling," Lorenzo continued. "The SEC is freezing assets. Other victims are coming forward. The media is circling. And none of it matters right now," Michelle said firmly, placing both hands on her belly where William moved restlessly. "The only thing that matters is keeping him safe." Lorenzo covered her hands with his. For the first time since their divorce, since this whole nightmare began, they were completely united in purpose. The monitors beeped steadily in the background as night fell over the city. Somewhere out there, Victoria sat in a holding cell. The Bennett empire collapsed around her, and justice slowly ground forward. But in this quiet room, watched over by machines and surrounded by the best medical care Lorenzo's money could buy, Michelle finally allowed herself to rest. The baby, William, moved beneath their joined hands, safe for now, his future still unwritten. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not as husband and wife, but as parents determined to give their son a world where truth and justice mattered more than power and privilege. 3 days into her hospital stay, Michelle watched from her bed as Rachel paced the private room, phone pressed to her ear. The monitors still beeped steadily, but the contractions had finally subsided, and her blood pressure was slowly normalizing. "Another one," Rachel mouthed, pointing to the growing stack of flower arrangements crowding every surface. The latest arrival, an elegant orchid display, came with a card expressing support from the National Association of Women Lawyers. Michelle shook her head. "From the Corporate Fraud Whistleblowers Network." Ever since the story broke about Victoria's arrest and the larger Bennett investigation, messages of support had poured in from across the country. Former employees, other victims of corporate discrimination, even old law school classmates who'd faced similar battles. "Hold on," Rachel said into her phone, then covered the mouthpiece. "The SEC wants to know if you're up for a video deposition tomorrow. They're worried about losing momentum while you're hospitalized." "Dr. Wilson already said no," Lorenzo interrupted, entering with a paper bag that smelled promisingly of real food. "Michelle needs rest, not depositions." "I can handle a video call," Michelle protested even as she eyed the bag hopefully. The doctor was very clear, Lorenzo insisted, unpacking what appeared to be homemade soup. No work until your blood pressure stabilizes. Rachel ended her call with a satisfied smile. Actually, we might not need that deposition after all. 3 more Bennett Industries executives just came forward with evidence. Seems Victoria's arrest sparked a race to cooperate. Rats fleeing the sinking ship, Lorenzo commented, helping Michelle adjust her pillows so she could eat comfortably. Speaking of Victoria, Michelle said between careful spoonfuls of soup, any update on the criminal charges? The DA is pushing for maximum penalties on all counts, Rachel reported. Attempted medical fraud, conspiracy, witness tampering. They're even looking at RICO charges for the broader corporate fraud scheme. And Richard Bennett. Still in the psychiatric hospital, Lorenzo said, but James says he's already offering to testify against other board members in exchange for leniency. Michelle set down her spoon, suddenly less hungry. He'd turn on his own daughter. Like father, like daughter, Rachel said grimly. Victoria's lawyers already reached out about a potential plea deal. She's willing to provide evidence about other companies they targeted. The baby kicked, and Michelle rubbed her belly soothingly. It really is all falling apart for them. Thanks to you, Lorenzo said quietly. Michelle met his eyes. Thanks to us. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Dr. Wilson entered, reviewing charts on her tablet. Well, she said, looking up with a smile, your latest numbers are encouraging. If they stay stable, we might be able to send you home tomorrow. Really? Michelle straightened hopefully. With conditions, the doctor emphasized. Strict bed rest, regular home monitoring, and absolutely no work for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks! Michelle and Rachel exclaimed simultaneously. Would you prefer to stay here instead? Dr. Wilson's tone brooked no argument. Your son needs you to rest, Mrs. Watson Richardson. Everything else can wait. After the doctor left, Rachel gathered her files. I'll handle the SEC and coordinate with the prosecutors. You focus on staying healthy. Once they were alone, Lorenzo cleared away the lunch remains, then settled into what had become his regular chair by Michelle's bed. We need to talk about what happens when you're released, he said carefully. Michelle tensed. I can manage. Your apartment is a 4th-floor walk-up, he cut in. No elevator, no doorman, no security. And after everything that's happened, I'm not moving in with you, Lorenzo. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she remembered from their marriage. But I have a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, 4 bedrooms, private garden, full security system. It was meant to be a renovation project, but I bought it 8 months ago, right after everything. Some part of me couldn't let go of the future we'd planned. A home, a family. He met her eyes. It's yours if you want it. No strings attached. Just a safe place for you and William. Michelle looked away, fighting unexpected tears. Damn hormones. I can't accept. You can, he insisted. Think of it as back rent for all the months I should have been supporting you and our son. Or think of it as an investment in William's future. Whatever helps you accept it. A particularly strong kick made Michelle wince. Someone seems to be voting yes. Lorenzo's face lit up. He's moving. Michelle hesitated, then took his hand and placed it where William was most active. The wonder in Lorenzo's expression made her heart ache with what might have been. Thank you, she said softly, for the house, for being here, for everything. I should have been here all along. His voice was rough with emotion. I was so caught up in appearances, in what other people thought, that I forgot what really mattered. We can't change the past, Michelle said, but we can do better going forward. Their moment was interrupted by another knock. James entered, looking apologetic. Sorry to disturb you, but there's something you both need to see. He handed Lorenzo a tablet. One of our investigators found this in Victoria's private emails. It's from 8 months ago. Michelle watched Lorenzo's face darken as he read. What is it? He turned the tablet so she could see. The email was from Richard Bennett to Victoria, dated just before the merger that had cost Michelle her job. It laid out their entire plan. Target Michelle as the weak link in Lorenzo's armor, use subtle discrimination to force her out, then position Victoria to help Lorenzo through the resulting personal crisis. They planned everything, Lorenzo said, his voice tight with fury. My own board members helped them all to set up their takeover. There's more, James said quietly. We found evidence that they've done this before. Other companies, other marriages. It was their standard playbook. Find a powerful man with a vulnerable wife, preferably one from a minority background, and exploit societal prejudices to destroy the marriage. then use the personal crisis to seize control of the company. Michelle felt sick. How many? At least 5 that we can document. Probably more. Lorenzo stood abruptly, pacing the room. I want them all exposed. Every case, every victim, full restitution, whatever it takes. Already in motion, James assured him. The SEC is coordinating with prosecutors in multiple states. The Bennett's entire operation is being dismantled. After James left, Lorenzo continued pacing, practically vibrating with anger. I played right into their hands. Everything they predicted about me, my insecurities, my pride, my weakness for social approval, I proved them right. Stop, Michelle's voice was firm. They manipulated everyone, exploited every systemic weakness they could find. But they didn't win. Because of you, he said, finally sitting again. Because you were stronger than they expected. Stronger than I was. Because we finally worked together, she corrected. And that's what we need to keep doing, for William's sake. As if on cue, the baby kicked again. Lorenzo managed a small smile, reaching for her belly. You're right, he said softly. No more letting pride or fear dictate our choices. From now on, we do what's right for our son. Michelle covered his hand with hers. Starting with accepting that house? His smile widened. Starting with accepting that house. Outside the hospital window, the November sun was setting over Manhattan. Somewhere out there, Victoria sat in a cell while her father plotted in a psychiatric ward, their empire crumbling around them. But here in this quiet room, watched over by steady monitors and surrounded by flowers from well-wishers, a new future was taking shape. Not the one they'd originally planned, but perhaps something equally meaningful, a partnership forged in adversity, focused on justice and the welfare of their son. The Brooklyn Heights brownstone stood before Michelle like a promise, its restored facade warm in the December sunshine. Lorenzo helped her up the front steps, his hand steady at her elbow while movers carried boxes from the truck. After a week of bed rest at home, this was her first real outing, and even these few steps left her breathless. Ready? Lorenzo asked, key poised at the lock. Michelle nodded, one hand resting on her now prominent belly. William moved restlessly, as if sensing the significance of the moment. The door swung open to reveal gleaming hardwood floors and sun-filled spaces. Everything had been meticulously prepared, furniture arranged, kitchen stocked, security system activated. But what caught Michelle's attention was the nursery on the second floor. I hope you don't mind, Lorenzo said as she stood in the doorway, taking in the sage-green walls and carefully chosen furniture. I had it prepared while you were in the hospital. Michelle moved slowly into the room, touching the soft blankets, the tiny clothes arranged in the dresser. You did all this? Rachel helped, he admitted. And I found the list you made, back when we first talked about having children. The one with all your ideas for the perfect nursery. I tried to match everything. Tears pricked at Michelle's eyes as she recognized items from that long-ago list. The vintage rocking chair, the star-pattern mobile, the bookshelf already filled with classic children's stories. You remembered. I remember everything, Lorenzo said quietly. All the dreams we had, all the plans. I was a fool to let them go. Before Michelle could respond, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Lorenzo tried to intercept it, still protective after her health scare, but she waved him off. I need to stay informed, she reminded him, then read the headline aloud. Bennett Industries board members face federal charges in massive fraud case. Lorenzo pulled out his own phone as it started ringing. James, he said after checking the display. What's the latest? He put the call on speaker so Michelle could hear. James's voice filled the nursery. The dominoes are falling. 3 board members have already agreed to plea deals. They're confirming everything. The systematic discrimination, the targeted marriages, all of it. And Victoria? Michelle asked, still maintaining her innocence, but her lawyer's tone is changing. With her father turning state's evidence and these new indictments, James paused. It's only a matter of time before she deals. After ending the call, Lorenzo and Michelle made their way downstairs to the kitchen, where lunch had been prepared by the service Lorenzo had insisted on hiring. It feels strange, Michelle said, settling carefully onto a cushioned chair, watching their whole world collapse while ours. She gestured at the beautiful kitchen, the peaceful garden visible through French doors. While ours rebuilds? Lorenzo suggested, serving her a bowl of soup. They brought it on themselves. Every life they ruined, every family they destroyed, it's all coming back to them now. Michelle's phone buzzed again, Rachel this time, with an update from the legal team. More victims had come forward, including 3 other women with stories eerily similar to Michelle's. The pattern was undeniable. Successful minority women married to powerful men, systematically targeted and discredited. "They're calling you a hero," Rachel reported. "The woman who finally brought down the Bennett empire. The National Women's Law Association wants you to speak at their conference once you're cleared by your doctor." "I'm no hero," Michelle protested. "I just refuse to stay quiet." "That's exactly what makes you a hero," Lorenzo said after she ended the call. "You fought back when everyone expected you to disappear quietly. You exposed the truth when it would have been easier to take a settlement." "We exposed the truth," Michelle corrected him. "I couldn't have done it without your help." "My belated help," he reminded her, "after months of being exactly the kind of coward they counted on me being." Michelle watched him move around the kitchen, noting how different he seemed from the polished executive who had once prioritized appearances over everything else. "You changed, you learned. That's what matters now." The baby kicked vigorously, making Michelle wince. Lorenzo was at her side immediately, concern etched on his face. "I'm fine," she assured him. "William's just very active today. I think he likes his new home." Lorenzo's hand joined hers on her belly, feeling their son's movements. These moments had become more frequent over the past week, quiet instances of connection that weren't quite romantic but held their own kind of intimacy. "The security team did a final sweep this morning," he said after a moment. "Every entrance is monitored, and there's always someone at the command center. You're safe here." "I know." Michelle met his eyes. "But that's not why I agreed to this house." "No? No." She looked around the beautiful kitchen, imagining future mornings with William. "I agreed because this feels like a fresh start, a chance to do things right this time." Lorenzo sat beside her. "For William, for all of us." Michelle chose her words carefully. "We can't go back to what we were, Lorenzo. Too much has happened, but we can build something new, a different kind of partnership." "Co-parents," he said, understanding in his voice. "Friends." "Friends," she agreed, "who happen to be having a baby and taking down a corrupt corporate empire together." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "When you put it that way." Their moment was interrupted by a delivery. More baby gifts from well-wishers. This time it was a package from the women at Michelle's old law firm, the ones who had reached out after the story broke to share their own experiences of discrimination. "Everyone wants to be part of William's story," Lorenzo observed, helping her open the gift, a beautiful handmade quilt with a note expressing solidarity and hope for the future. "They see him as a symbol," Michelle said, running her fingers over the soft fabric. "The baby who helped expose decades of corruption, the future they fought for." "He's more than a symbol," Lorenzo said firmly. "He's our son, and he'll grow up knowing that his mother is the strongest person I've ever known." Michelle felt tears threatening again. These pregnancy hormones were relentless, and that his father learned to stand up for what's right, even when it was difficult. They spent the afternoon settling into the house, Lorenzo insisting Michelle rest, while he directed the movers and organized deliveries. By evening, her bedroom was fully arranged, the kitchen was stocked, and the security team had run through their protocols twice. "You don't have to stay," Michelle said as Lorenzo prepared to leave for the night. He hesitated at the door. "I'll be 10 minutes away if you need anything. Day or night." "I know," she smiled, remembering how far they'd come from that night at LeBlanc. "We're okay, Lorenzo. Better than okay." After he left, Michelle stood in the nursery again, watching the last sunlight paint patterns on the sage-green walls. William moved inside her strong and steady, while outside her window, Brooklyn Heights settled into evening peace. Her phone lit up with one final news alert. "Victoria Bennett accepts plea deal, agrees to testify against co-conspirators." Michelle smiled, rubbing her belly gently. "The truth always comes out, little one. Sometimes it just needs someone brave enough to speak it." The stars were appearing over Brooklyn, and in her new home, surrounded by symbols of fresh starts and second chances, Michelle finally felt something she hadn't expected. Hope, not just for justice or vindication, but for the future, William's future, and the new kind of family they were building, stronger for having been broken and rebuilt. On a crisp January morning, as snow dusted Brooklyn Heights in white, William Marcus Watson Richardson made his entrance into the world. The delivery room at Mount Sinai buzzed with controlled urgency as Michelle's labor progressed faster than expected, her body finally ready after weeks of careful monitoring. Lorenzo hadn't left her side for 18 hours, letting her crush his hand through contractions, feeding her ice chips and watching in awe as their son emerged with a powerful cry that filled the room. 7 pounds, 6 ounces of perfect health, with Michelle's determination and Lorenzo's nose, just as she'd predicted months ago. "He's beautiful," Lorenzo whispered, cradling William while Michelle rested. "Absolutely perfect." Through her exhaustion, Michelle smiled. "He knows what he wants," she observed as William latched on for his first feeding, already showing that Watson stubbornness. The moment was interrupted by a soft knock. Rachel peeked in, her face lighting up at the sight of the baby. "Special delivery," she said, holding up a tablet. "I know you said no work, but you might want to see this." The screen showed a news report. Victoria Bennett had just been sentenced. 8 years in federal prison, plus millions in restitution to her victims. Richard Bennett, still in poor health, had received house arrest and massive fines. The Bennett empire was officially defunct. "Justice delivered on the same day as William," Rachel said softly. "Feels right somehow." Michelle looked down at her son, peaceful now after feeding. A new beginning. As if to emphasize the point, her phone buzzed with messages from the other women they'd helped, the ones who'd come forward after Michelle exposed the Bennett's pattern of discrimination. Photos of flowers, congratulations, and promises to support William's college fund poured in. "You've started a movement," Lorenzo observed, reading over her shoulder. "The SEC's new corporate accountability guidelines are being called the Watson-Richardson rules." "We started a movement," Michelle corrected him. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't chosen to fight beside me." Lorenzo's eyes were suspiciously bright as he watched William sleep in Michelle's arms. "I almost lost this," he said quietly. "Almost let my pride and fear cost me everything that matters." "But you didn't," Michelle reminded him. "When it really counted, you chose what was right." The next few days passed in a blur of visitors, nurses, and quiet moments of family bonding. The hospital suite filled with flowers and gifts, including a particularly touching delivery. A handmade mobile from the women at LeBlanc, where Michelle's journey of resistance had begun. On the day they were cleared to go home, Lorenzo insisted on driving at exactly 5 miles per hour below the speed limit, much to Michelle's amusement. William slept peacefully in his car seat, unaware of his father's newfound overcautiousness. The brownstone welcomed them with warm lights and the scent of fresh flowers. Lorenzo's mother had flown in to help, and Michelle's sister had stocked the kitchen with homemade meals. The nursery, so carefully prepared months ago, now felt truly complete with William in his crib. That evening, after the visitors had gone and William was fed, Michelle sat in the vintage rocking chair while Lorenzo prepared bottles for the night ahead. "I received an interesting offer today," she said, watching him move confidently through tasks that would have terrified him a few months ago. "From the Women's Law Association?" "No, from Richardson Global's board." Michelle shifted William to her shoulder, patting gently. "They want me to head up a new division focused on corporate ethics and accountability, full partner status, flexible hours, and a mandate to implement real change." Lorenzo paused in his preparations. "What do you think?" "I think," Michelle chose her words carefully, "I think it's time to rebuild something stronger on the ruins of what was broken, not just for us or William, but for everyone who needs someone to fight for them." "The board's serious about change," Lorenzo added. "After everything that happened with the Bennetts, they understand the need for real oversight. Your experience, your integrity, it's exactly what the company needs." William made a small sound in his sleep, and both parents instinctively quieted. After a moment, Michelle spoke again. "There's something else," she said softly. "The house next door is for sale." Lorenzo looked up sharply. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that William deserves to have both his parents close by. I'm saying that while we can't go back to what we were, we can build something new, something honest." "Neighbors?" "Neighbors," Michelle confirmed. "Co-parents who respect each other. Partners in making sure our son grows up understanding the importance of integrity and courage." Lorenzo set down the bottles he'd been preparing and moved to kneel beside the rocking chair. William's tiny hand had wrapped around one of his fingers, holding on with surprising strength. "I'd like that," he said simply. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son sleep, until Michelle spoke again. "I saw the paperwork on your desk yesterday. You're restructuring the company?" Lorenzo nodded. "Converting to a public benefit corporation, implementing all the reforms you fought for. It's time Richardson Global lived up to its potential for positive change." "Victoria would hate that," Michelle observed with a small smile. "Victoria has 8 years to think about her choices." Lorenzo's voice held no bitterness now, only certainty. We have a lifetime to show William what real success looks like. As if recognizing his name, William stirred, opening eyes that somehow held both their shades of brown. Michelle adjusted him gently, and Lorenzo reached to help without being asked, a small gesture that spoke volumes about how far they'd come. Outside, snow continued to fall on Brooklyn Heights, covering the world in clean white possibility. Inside, surrounded by the warmth of their carefully rebuilt life, a family that had been broken by pride and prejudice found its way to something stronger, a partnership built on truth, justice, and the kind of love that puts others first. William would grow up knowing this story, not just the headlines about corporate fraud and discrimination, but the deeper truth about redemption and second chances. He would understand that his parents' greatest act of love was choosing to rebuild something honest from the ashes of what they'd lost. And years later, when the Watson-Richardson rules became the gold standard for corporate accountability, when Michelle's work inspired a new generation of lawyers to fight for justice, when Lorenzo's transformation of Richardson Global proved that ethical business could also be good business, William would understand that his birth had marked not just the end of one chapter, but the beginning of something far more important, a legacy of courage, integrity, and the unwavering belief that doing what's right matters more than doing what's easy. As the night deepened and William slept peacefully between his parents, Michelle and Lorenzo shared a look of quiet understanding. They had started this journey as adversaries, moved through being allies, and found their way to a different kind of love, one built on respect, shared purpose, and the joy of watching their son grow in a world they had helped make better. It wasn't the ending they'd originally planned, but it was the one they'd earned. And in many ways it was better, because this ending was also a beginning, and this time they were ready to write their story together. After following Michelle and Lorenzo's powerful journey, reflect, if you were in Michelle's shoes, would you be able to forgive Lorenzo and build a new kind of relationship focused on co-parenting? Or would the wounds of abandonment and prejudice be too deep to allow any kind of reconciliation? Consider how pride, prejudice, and social pressure can destroy relationships, but also how the courage to face up to past mistakes can create something new and stronger. Michelle chose a path of strength and dignity, allowing Lorenzo to redeem himself not as a husband, but as a father and ally. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.